For 2 years, the noise coming from my neighbor's house was a constant, deafening mystery. It wasn't just the noise that had the neighborhood on edge, it was the vibrations. We could feel them through the walls, through the very ground under our feet. When I finally went inside, I learned that some secrets are better left buried, and this one was tuned to a frequency from hell. Lewis was a strange guy. Even before all the noise started, something about him was just off. He was awkward and aloof, like a ghost floating through his own life. After his mother passed away 2 years ago, he basically sealed himself inside that house. The lawn became a jungle, trash bags piled up on the porch like forgotten bodies, and the mailbox overflowed, vomiting junk mail all over the dead grass. And then there were the windows. One by one, he boarded them up tight from the inside, drawing the curtains like he was saying a final goodbye to the sun. You know, there's a name for this sort of thing, the broken windows theory. It's the idea that visible signs of neglect, litter, graffiti, broken windows, are a signal that no one cares, and that signal invites even worse things to come. Lewis's house wasn't just a house anymore, it was a scream for help that none of us knew how to answer. It was one giant broken window, and we were about to find out what kind of chaos it was letting in. It started with the sounds at night. At first, it was just hammering, loud, annoyingly rhythmic, and usually kicking off around 11 p.m. Then came the high-pitched scream of a power saw chewing through wood, followed by the grating whine of a drill. The nights were punctuated by this industrial nightmare, a symphony of construction that made sleep completely impossible. Through the cracks in his boarded-up windows, we'd catch these brilliant, demonic flashes from a welding torch, silhouetting the decay of his home against the darkness. Every single night, it was the same routine. The noise would build until someone finally cracked and called the cops. The police would show up, make him shut it down, and a blessed, temporary quiet would fall over the street. But sure enough, the next night, he'd be right back at it. One night, I just had enough. I marched over there and pounded on his front door for what felt like 10 minutes straight. The sawing finally stopped, and I could hear him cursing up a storm inside. The door creaked open just enough for him to peer out, his face hidden behind a raised welding mask. The house behind him was pitch black, but out of the darkness I heard this strange sound, like radio static pulsing in and out, carrying the faint murmur of a distant crowd. He just stared at me, his eyes unblinking behind the glass of the mask. After a long, painful silence, he spoke. "Hey, Bill," he said, his voice all raspy. "You think there's an afterlife?" Before I could even wrap my head around the question, he shut the door in my face. I just stood there, the bizarre question hanging in the cold night air. I walked back to my house more confused and unsettled than angry. What in God's name was he building in there?
His obsession just got worse. He started hoarding, making trips in his beat-up pickup and returning with mountains of scrap metal, lumber, and these strange tools I'd never even seen before. One afternoon, I saw him drag a massive industrial jackhammer through his front door. When he caught me watching from my window, he stopped and just gave me this dead, grave stare before disappearing inside. The nightly hammering was soon replaced by the deep, bone-rattling thunder of the jackhammer, followed by the sharp, rhythmic chiming of a pickaxe, like he was digging a mine in his own living room. The rumors started flying around the neighborhood. Was he building a rocket? Some kind of bizarre, deviant art project? The theories were wild, but none of them even came close to the truth. The whole situation took a much darker turn when the new sounds started. Screaming. Not screams of pain, but of pure rage. It was Lewis, and he was arguing with his dead mother. One evening, the shouting was so intense, so full of anguish and fury, I felt like I had to check on him. I knocked on the door, and it flew open instantly. Lewis stood there, shirtless, a walking skeleton. His arm was slick with blood, dripping from a knife he held loosely in his hand. His eyes were wide, psychotic. "Privacy, Bill!" he shrieked. Then, like a switch was flipped, his expression went blank. He looked down at the knife in his hand as if he'd never seen it before, dropped it, and slammed the door shut. Just before it closed, I heard it again, that sound of living static, like an astronomical wind, and a disembodied voice whispering a single word: failure. The The police came. They saw the cuts on his arm and just left him a card for a suicide hotline. For a few nights, the building stopped. I thought, or maybe I just hoped, that he had finally given up. But the construction was just replaced by a low, constant droning hum that vibrated right up through the floorboards. It was a new normal, a new layer of dread. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning. I looked out my window and saw him in his front yard. He was emaciated, his body a roadmap of self-inflicted scars. He was wearing only a pair of shorts and his welding mask. In his hand, he held a handsaw dripping with fresh blood. One of his fingers was just gone. The stump was a cauterized, blackened nub. Our neighbor, Jeff, a hot-headed guy from across the street, ran over and started screaming at him. Lewis didn't even flinch. He just dropped the saw and pulled a hunting knife from his waistband. All hell broke loose. Someone called 911. An ambulance came and took him away. And in all the confusion, they left his front door ajar. The temptation was a fire in my gut. I had to know.
At 3 in the morning, I couldn't fight it anymore. I slipped out of my house and crept across the dead lawn. The front door groaned open into a complete nightmare of hoarding and rot. The air was thick with the smell of decay and something else, something metallic and electric like ozone. The walls were smeared with blood. Towers of old magazines and junk threatened to collapse with every step. And from somewhere deep inside the house, a parrot chirped, its voice a perfect, chilling imitation of his mother's. "Disgrace," it squawked. "You will be punished." I moved through the labyrinth of filth, following that droning hum towards a door at the back of the house. It screeched as I pushed it open, and I stepped into a scene my mind still refuses to fully accept. It wasn't a room anymore. It was a cave. He had smashed away the walls of the house. The floor had been jackhammered into a deep, dark pit filled with murky water. Rising from the edges of the pit were 4 massive steel pillars, crude, ugly, welded things that pierced the ceiling, all covered in a web of thick cables. The cables snaked over to a bank of enormous, ancient-looking speakers and a complex console of dials and switches. Buckets of dirt and rock were piled everywhere. And then I saw it. In the center of the room, lit by a ring of flickering candles, was a stretcher. On the stretcher lay a body. It was a mummified corpse, curled in a fetal position, dressed in an old-fashioned Swiss dress. Its skin was like brown leather stretched tight over a skull, its face a permanent, horrifying grin. It was his mother. "Gambler!" the parrot shrieked from the other room. "Drop out!" Footsteps. My blood ran cold. He was back. I dove behind a pile of dirt as the main power generator roared to life. Fluorescent lights flickered on, bathing the cavern in a sterile, horrifying glow. Lewis stumbled in, muttering to the corpse, to the parrot. He took the hunting knife and carved another long, deep line into his chest, hissing in pain, but his eyes were serene. He walked to the console. He plugged in one last cable. The humming intensified, becoming a physical pressure in the air. And then the speakers erupted. It wasn't music. It was the sound of a million voices screaming all at once, a stadium of pure, undiluted panic and agony. A wind roared from the speakers, not just a sound, but a physical force, a cosmological hurricane that felt like it could tear continents apart. The dials on the console spun wildly, and through the chaos I heard snippets of pure calamity, explosions, fire, the sound of worlds ending. And through it all, Lewis just stood there, a Zen monster, calmly carving symbols into the palm of his hand while the frequency of hell tore the air apart. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't take it anymore. I screamed and kicked a wheelbarrow full of scrap metal as hard as I could. It crashed into one of the steel pillars. The pillar groaned, bent, and then collapsed, ripping cables from the ceiling. The sound from the speakers turned into a single deafening shriek of feedback. Lewis spun around, his face a mask of pure fury. "You bastard!" he screamed, his voice barely audible over the noise. "I'll kill everything!" He charged at me with the knife. We fought a desperate, clumsy battle in the heart of his mad creation. He bit my face, his teeth sharp and feral. With a surge of adrenaline, I shoved him with all my might. He stumbled backward, lost his footing at the edge of the pit, and fell with a splash into the dark water below. I didn't wait to see if he'd surface. I just fled. I ran out of that house of horrors, and I didn't look back.
My family and I left that night. We packed a few bags and just drove, ending up at a hotel 3 towns over. We never went back. Weeks later, I saw the story online. The police had finally entered the property after neighbors reported the smell. They found Lewis. He hadn't drowned. He'd crawled out of the pit, sawed his own throat, and died embracing the mummified corpse of his mother. They found a note clutched in his hand, a final heartbreaking confession. It just said, "Failure. Gambler. I tried to save you. I tried to bring you back." The papers called it a macabre scene, a tragic story of a man consumed by grief and madness. They talked about the horde, the pit, the strange machine, but they couldn't explain it. They couldn't explain the sounds I heard. So what was it? What was he building for 2 years in that house? A portal? A receiver tuned to some cosmic frequency of suffering? A machine built from grief and guilt, designed to punch a hole through reality to find someone who was gone? The authorities will tell you it was all just the product of a sick mind, but I was there. I heard it. I felt it. Don't tell me it was just madness. Please, don't tell me it was a gateway to hell, because I'm terrified I already know the answer. What do you think he was building? Let me know your theories in the comments, and if you want more stories that'll keep you up at night, make sure to like and subscribe. Sleep tight.